Growing up, Alex Timbers didn't feel a strong connection to the theater. Now the two-time Tony nominee has lent his directing talents to creating Broadway productions like Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, Peter and the Starcatcher, Rocky, and more. He currently has 3 shows on The Great White Way, serving as production consultant on the innovative American Utopia and as director for the outrageous Beetlejuice and the resplendent Moulin Rouge. Hear what he has to say about his public access TV show, his advice to aspiring directors, and more on this week's Show People. Alex, thank you for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me.
I love your career because it really has been sort of a slow build and a really proper build to where you are right now.
Sure.
But where you are right now is you have created these 2 amazing musicals that audiences love, huge hits. Thousands of people every night are seeing your work and talking about Moulin Rouge and Beetlejuice. Are you able to sort of have a moment and go like, oh, I've accomplished something great with 2 things, and I know they just sort of happen to happen at the same time.
Yeah, they totally both just happen to happen at the same time, but it's extraordinary, and I love both those acting companies, and so it's wonderful to go back and see them, and yeah, I feel really proud of the creative teams and the companies behind them, yeah.
People are loving them. I mean, when people walk out of Beetlejuice or Moulin Rouge, they feel like they had like an experience.
Well, you know, I love those shows. Like when I think back to my earliest theater going experiences, those things where the experience is transformative. As soon as you walk through those doors, you're in a whole new world. Like with Beetlejuice and Moulin Rouge, we ran with that. But even going back to my first Broadway show, Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, and the kind of transformation of the Jacobs was really exciting. I think the audience experience and the role of the audience in the drama is really important to me. It's at the forefront of my mind from like the first treatment stage of a show all the way through, the final preview. Yeah, and so figuring out that sort of the frise-on across the footlights is really thrilling for me.
Well, you lived with these shows for a very long time.
Yes.
I mean, both these shows, I think Beetlejuice for
10 years.
10 years Beetlejuice. Yeah. That's insane.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was a different person when we started. Musicals generally take a very long time.
Right. And has that vision changed a lot over that time? Or do you sort of like, in your head, do you sort of lock into something when you hear about a project like Beetlejuice?
That's a great question. So when I first heard about Beetlejuice, I definitely I wasn't immediately like, oh, we should adapt this for the stage. There were kind of like 4 things where I said to the producer, I think if we did these things, it would be really exciting as a theatrical adaptation. And Kevin McCormick, the producer at Warner Brothers, embraced that. And so then we were off to the races. I've done shows where I have not been bright enough to at certain points do a reality check of where the show has organically developed and shift a kind of physical production concept around that. And so I'm trying to do that more and more and do sort of check-ins along the way of just allowing that, not being beholden to an initial impulse or idea. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing that's interesting about sort of lumping together Moulin Rouge and Beetlejuice is that those original films, they both started as films, original films, and they're from 2 of, I think, the most visionary
brilliant
directors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, Tim Burton for Beetlejuice and Baz Luhrmann for Moulin Rouge, those are 2 of my favorite visual cinematic artists.
Me too.
They both have such a specific aesthetic, and you have sort of your own visual language. Is that sort of a great jump off for then you to add your work to it? Is that restricting in any ways?
Yeah, well, both of those filmmakers are sort of like real world creators. And what we tried to not do was whack up any of the same exact visuals on stage because that would be kind of boring. It could feel like theme parky. So we really tried to take what the emotional energy of the piece was at the beginning, re-break the story. And so Beetlejuice, pretty different from what happens in the film. And then just sort of follow the kind of the narrative and emotional through line. And then in the design process, kind of riff off that, off the world, but also we know it's a theatrical adaptation. Mm-hmm. And so you'll see in Derek McLean's set for Moulin Rouge or Kathy Zuber's costumes, you'll see nods to Catherine Martin's brilliant work on the film. But I think, if you ever put anything side by side, you'd say, oh, it's of the same flavor, but it's not the same thing, And I think that's part of what kept the process so exciting and and if you're a fan of the thing, just gives you more access to that world you love, You're
always working with the original creators in some capacity, the rights to the property.
Yeah.
Some things that we see come to Broadway that are adaptations are much more sort of by the numbers,
right.
scene for scene adaptations. When you do these projects, it's not that. It feels very much like put into a new creative blender.
You know, I think of Beetlejuice particularly as kind of like fan fiction version of it's like, what if Liddy and Beetlejuice were the protagonists and this happened and this happened? And, you know, with Baz, he was so wonderful because his background is theater. Before he was this like virtuosic filmmaker, he was a virtuosic theater maker. And so from our first conversation, he was like, I don't want this to be, you know, just the film on stage, you know. And we started dreaming up, like, could it all take place in the club? And, you know, and you know, figuring out a different theatrical envelope. So in both those situations, one of the things that was really inspiring and kind of exciting about it was in both situations they were like, go make your own thing. We know you love it too, but go make the thing that is something worthy of the stage. Yeah.
Did you see Baz's La Boheme?
Yeah.
On Broadway?
Yeah.
Okay.
Amazing.
I feel like when I met him at that time, I was like, just please do Moulin Rouge.
Right.
Did he ever want to direct it?
I think there was a moment when he wanted to direct it, but I think, you know, going back to the start of our conversation, he also wants to make many, many things. You know, he makes all these incredible films. He spends like 5 years making a film because he's so detailed. And so the idea of like kind of recreating movies for the stage, I think it was kind of like boring as an idea for him, you know, a little bit.
But how exciting is it that you now know him and you're a collaborator and he's around? I mean, he's really around.
Yeah, he's been awesome. Yeah. He's been amazing. And again, he gets the like push-pull of like, okay, so this is a different thing. Here's like 2 things you might keep in your mind that like influenced me when I was thinking about the creation of the story. And it's like, oh my gosh, yes, please. You know, it's been the perfect balance.
What about Tim Burton? Does he have any interest in the Beetlejuice musical?
So for Tim Burton, he was mostly making Dumbo during the time, so he's less involved. But, you know, inspiring. And for me, like on a sort of strange personal level, I made the Pee Wee Herman show, right?
Yeah.
Which was in 2010.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about this until recently, but, you know, that was Tim Burton's first movie was a Pee Wee movie.
Yeah, I fell in love with Pee Wee because of Tim Burton.
Yeah, amazing.
It's The Big Adventure, Pee Wee's Big Adventure.
That's right. The second movie he ever made was Beetlejuice, and that was where you first started seeing his aesthetic.
Oh,
so
wow.
you know, it was, and I hired Dave Corns for both to do the set, and it was kind of interesting watching how some of the lessons we learned on Pee Wee from a physical production standpoint helped us on Beetlejuice. I was very happy to have had that experience before this one.
Were you a fan of both films?
Yeah.
Yeah. You originally wanted to become a filmmaker, right? Isn't that sort of, was that an early?
Yeah, when I grew up in New York City, and I used to have a public access TV show.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know all about Shamu.
Wait, you've heard about this?
Shamu, yeah. We're going to talk about Shamu because first of all, I'm obsessed with public access.
Yeah.
So is that your first foray into filmmaking, your public access show?
Yeah, that was. It was on Channel 69 on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. You know, the channel might still exist.
It's still there.
Yeah.
You could still do a public access show if you have any spare time.
Thank you. After this, I'm going to look it up.
Now, the problem is I've looked and I can't find any footage. There's no YouTube channel for the Shamu review. Do we own the beta tapes? What is happening?
The tapes exist and they will never be shown.
They
publicly.
will never be shown. You won't even share like a quick clip.
I can't tell you. I would be so mortified that, you know, I would collapse into dust. Yeah.
Would you really?
Yeah, it's super.
That'd be quite a magic trick if we had if I could just show you right here and you actually collapse into dust.
It would be like you'd be a chair and a pile of dust. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to talk about your childhood. When we come back, we'll be back with more Alex Timbers. And we're back with Alex Timbers.
Hey.
Just having you here makes me want to like go see Moulin Rouge again. It's a sickness.
You.
I love that show so much. Like it's amazing. I want to talk about your childhood because you're a real New Yorker.
Born and bred. Yeah. We go see theater a little bit growing up, but I went to an all-boys school, so it was really sort of all hands on deck when you got to the annual school play. So I played.
That was the Buckley School?
The Buckley School. I played Madame Jardin, Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme. I played Charles Dickens once.
Oh.
Yeah. Got an eye infection because we created the gray hair with that stuff from like the 60s or 70s where you put like frost highlights in your hair.
Oh my God.
And a snowdrift fell on my eye and So the performance was a debacle.
Was it like mid-performance?
Yeah, I had to do one of those eye shots, those things where you sort of flush out the eye.
It out, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the kind of like my relationship to theater for the first, like, I don't know,
so you were
15
doing
years
theater
of my
at the
life.
Buckley School.
Yeah.
Buckley School looks like it's a fancy school.
Yeah, like coat and tie.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'd be underdressed right now to go to Broadway as a 6-year-old.
You shared a photo on Instagram of you as a little boy in a suit.
Yes.
That kid.
That kid.
That's the kid
that was
that
me.
went to the Buckley School.
Yeah, that's right. He was so sweet. He was so innocent. He had no idea what the world had in store. Yeah.
Being a kid in New York City, I mean, that's pretty cool. And
great.
And at some point, you did leave, though. Like, your parents split up and you moved.
That's right. I went to high school my sophomore year in Lake Forest, Illinois, which is kind of like a John Hughes suburb. And actually, like, What?
You knew, like, John Hughes?
John Hughes' son.
Okay.
Yeah, and I made, like, a little, like, short, I think, together in high school. And, it was great to go to a, like, co-ed public high school. It was, like, after being in an all-boys school for like 10 years, it was great.
I loved hearing that you auditioned for that movie Kids.
Oh, yeah.
Larry Clark's movie, right?
Yeah,
At what point was that?
I don't know. I was probably like 15 or something like that. I think they ended up casting a lot of kids who went to St. Anne's in the end.
Oh, okay.
There were kids that were like a lot sort of, cooler and like kind of grittier and
right. So
and
you
had a
weren't
little more
gritty,
edge.
Because I remember seeing Kids when it first came out.
Yeah.
And that was the whole like angle. It was sort of like, let's expose what Manhattan kids are really like.
Yeah.
All the crazy stuff they're getting involved in. Did you get involved in any crazy stuff?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when you're a New York City kid, you age a little bit faster, right? Yeah.
And you ended up at Yale. So how did you decide that that's what you wanted to do?
I ended up like wanting to do like film and things like that. Sort of continuing in that realm. And at Yale, they had this like film program.
Okay.
And then when you go there, they then suddenly said you have to take all these lessons to learn how to use all these cameras and equipment. But we sort of knew how to do that already. So it felt like, this isn't a fast path to making things. So
you're like, I've been on public access.
I've been on public access, very fancy.
Years.
So I ended up instead doing improv and sketch comedy, and I was really interested in that, and because you could make things right off the bat, and then became interested in the mechanics of comedy, and so I directed a farce. And not from the sense of like I want to be a theater director, just because I wanted to sort of understand that more. And so then I directed another farce, and then I directed.
Those farces were which?
I directed Black Comedy by Peter Schaffer, and then Lend Me a Tenor.
Okay.
And then ended up directing other like plays, and I founded an experimental theater company that was sort of like with some friends that became the kind of like early version of my theater company in New York, Les Frères Corbusier. And
thank you. I didn't take French, so thank you for saying it.
Of course, absolutely. I'll take the lead on that. And so by the end, I sort of became the president of the college theater company called the Dramat there, and ended up by the end being incredibly immersed in theater. My first job out of college was then being Lynn Meadows' intern at Manhattan Theater Club.
How does she take her coffee? Did you have to do Lynn Meadows' coffee? Or?
Yeah, I did. She's a wonderful boss, but I think it's like a paper bag brown was what I remember. That much milk. Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you about I read about How to Succeed in Business. Was that at Yale?
Yes, that was.
Is there a tape of that? That sounds amazing.
It was crazy.
Every little piece of information I've found about How to Succeed in Business was crazy.
It was a Brechtian How to Succeed in Business that really tried.
Sure.
We couldn't fly someone, so the concept instead was a kind of Brechtian monist mon kind of thing where Pierpont Finch was in a gorilla suit in a cage, and as you were leading up to the theater, I guess it's the very Moulin Rouge. As you were coming down York Street towards the theater, there were like people like carnival people. So the whole pre-show was carny, and then everything had title cards. When I think it's Wally Wamper at the end. I think they killed him, and they pulled out his guts, and we had confetti cannons of guts. The set was all white and glass. During Happy to Keep His Dinner Warm, it didn't feel the critique was hard enough. So we had Rosemary, in order to undercut it, cleaned a toilet, I think, during it.
Yeah.
It was like confrontational, definitely, but it was also the graduation show. So it was the show where all the parents come back to cheer on their kids. So it was the audience relationship to the subject matter of the show and the tone of the show was probably ill-conceived.
So you don't have any interest in revisiting this vision? Because I want to see it.
I would love to do How to Succeed again. I mean, I think it's like a fantastic show. And like the idea that something so satirical was so successful. When they say satire closes on Saturday night or whatever, it's like, it would be cool to take a a contemporary look at that. Yeah.
Now that you're this very well-established Broadway, you make these big Broadway hits, so much of your early work was so experimental.
Yeah.
And you still have elements of all that in your work, and it's actually beautiful to see how you've been able to bring that vision into a big budget Broadway musical.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I had a little experimental theater company early on, and the work was kind of looking at historical figures and historical subject matters through sort of irreverent mediums and contexts, and definitely every show was, sort of complete kind of its own thing within this mission statement. So we did a Hedda Gabler with live robots called Heddatron.
Yep.
We recreated a Christian evangelical haunted house at St. Anne's Warehouse called a Hell House. We had over 100 performers, 15,000 square feet, and we had Pastor Keenan Roberts from Colorado Springs, who's this hate monger, come out and consult. And I was like, our politics are completely different, but we want it to be accurate. And so he gave notes, and he actually tried to recruit one of our actors he liked so much for his own Hell House. I did a Very Merry Unauthorized Children's Scientology pageant, which was a nativity pageant celebrating the life of L. Ron Hubbard with only 8 to 12-year-olds in robes.
I saw that one, yes.
In like these polyphonic spree, brightly colored, to singing to karaoke tracks. And we did a Robert Moses show, Robert Moses v. Jane Jacobs kind of thing with musical comedy. Doug Cohen wrote some songs that were wonderful. And that all led to these two final shows, which were Dance Dance Revolution, which was a 60-member cast, Future Society, where dance is illegal, and it was all to Disney rave music for babies. Dance Dance Revolution rave music for babies. So it was like Donald Duck, but the show was wildly sexual, and it was a short run, but conceived as such, and was really fun. And that whole team became the team for Blay Blay Andrew Jackson.
Right, yeah.
And then we were also doing Blay Blay Andrew Jackson,
right.
emo rock, 7th President of the United States. Yeah.
Right. Oh, I know. That was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
If you could revisit any of those other earlier shows, which one would you choose?
Yeah, I think the Scientology pageant was just, we brought it back over and over. It was just wonderful, and it every time sort of like new audiences, because it was very smart and sharp and satirical, but it was only using the Scientologists' own, their own. It wasn't like any critical
actual text.
So it allowed the kind of the Church of Scientology to critique the Church of Scientology, if you will. You know what I mean? And I thought that was great. And a smart guy named Kyle Jarrow, who wrote SpongeBob, wrote that.
Right. And what happened to those adorable kids from the Scientology pageant? How are they doing?
They're doing great. One of them is in one of the, I think, the San Francisco production of Hamilton, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, amazing.
So it was a good experience for them.
I'm sure.
Yeah. I'm sure they learned a lot.
Yeah, it was fun. It was also fun. Like, their parents were amazing and super into it. So it was a sort of a great experience.
Everybody was into it. It was fantastic.
Thank
you.
We're
going to talk more with Alex Timbers after this break.
Five stars, all rise for To Kill a Mockingbird, unforgettable and unmissable. A Mockingbird for our moment, beautiful, elegiac, satisfying, even exhilarating, a New York Times critic's pick. The most loved novel of all time, all rise for Aaron Sorkin's great play, one of the best in history. Mockingbird is now the most successful American play in Broadway history. It has not played to a single empty seat. Ed Harris is Atticus Finch in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird.
We are back with Alex Timbers, who keeps just creating amazing things.
Thank you.
Are you working on new things? You have things in your head? You don't have to tell me what they are, but are you?
Oh yeah.
If you work on things for 10 years, you must have the next 6 things.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah, I know where I'll be when I'm 50. No, I mean, one of the fun things coming up is the Moulin Rouge rollout.
And I know. It's going to become, it's an industry.
A lot of places. Yeah, it's
right. Like Moulin Rouge will be playing in all sorts of international cities.
Yeah.
A national tour.
Yes, amazing.
Keep going on Broadway.
Yeah.
You're going to have to create like a Satine camp somewhere and put girls on swings. And I mean,
I love that show, and it's one of those shows that never get tired of going in and watching and over and over. It's just so fun, and the perform. If we're lucky enough to get to work with performers like the performers we have in there right now, it's just going to be a blast.
Yeah, I love Aaron Tveit and Karen Olivo as Christian and Satine. Karen, when I first heard her name, I thought, Karen's going to be Satine. And I feel like actually Satine has probably undergone, in my opinion, sort of the biggest development. I feel like we sort of know more about her and we get a lot more of her backstory, right? And you sort of know, you get a better understanding of really where she came from. And that must have been sort of one of the things that you wanted to build up.
That was like a desire from the beginning for John Logan and Justin Levine and I. And it was like, as soon as we started the adaptation process, we kept thinking about how we could deepen and enrich the character of Satine. And we loved the character from the film, and but felt like the kind of want of wanting to be a great actress, is there something kind of deeper and more profound that might relate to what it is, that experience of being that courtesan in 1900. So wanting to get away a little bit from the character who's locked in the tower, you know, the someday I'll fly away kind of character. And Baz was really supportive of it. And so we pushed further in terms of like, how can we give her as much agency as possible, and how can we make her want as true and authentic to the life experience that she was probably having at the time. I
love how the final moments of the movie is such an explosion, and it actually kind of gets quieter, and it's fun to sort of play with those things, right?
Oh yeah, the epic and the intimate, that's like the key to something like Moulin Rouge. It's like, how do you go from the like, the virtuosic camera wizardry and the frantic cutting, that was the energy of that, and the scope of it, and the immersion, and then suddenly do our version of what it is to be a close-up on Christian in a cone of light as he weeps, you know, like, and holds his dead lover. You know, it's like toggling between that, I think, is the sort of the secret of Moulin Rouge.
It's a tricky balance to honor what people walk in, with Beetlejuice too, honor what people walk in sort of expecting, and sort of your own vision, right? But I think you sort of walk that line really beautifully.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know, the way the Beetlejuice and the Moulin Rouge process went was we broke story. I remember the hotel room that John and Justin and I were in. I hauled my girlfriend's synthesizer across Times Square to go to, and we just broke story as if it was a brand new, we were adapting a story as like it was any source material. Subsequent to that, started spotting songs how you would like. So we really tried to not begin at a place where we were just saying like, okay, here's what that was, and now here's just the theater version of that.
You've also been working on David Byrne's American Utopia show, right? Which I know
he's awesome.
Audiences are loving it. I don't know what to walk in expecting, but I'm really excited to see it.
So cool.
Thank you. You worked with Ben Platt, right? On his Netflix special.
Yeah, we just did that. And
you stay very busy.
Well, the people I love collaborating with that inspire me so much are these people like Ben Platt, John Mulaney, David Byrne, Sonia Taya, that are such multi-hyphenates. John Logan like that, producer, writer, and they just look at things from so many different angles at once. And as someone who's also been sort of a writer and a producer as well, like I feel really excited by those kinds of collaborators where everything's on the table. One of the great experiences was working on Peter and the Starcatcher, where that whole cast, like you have people like Kevin DeLaguila, who's who's playing Smee, and he's a lyricist, he's a book writer, he's a director,
they did Altar Boys,
he's an actor, he did everything. So when you say to him, okay, so here's the thing we're trying to craft here, he's going to have like 10 ideas of like how to do that in all sorts of different ways, staging ideas, and that kind of really full-bodied collaboration is the stuff I like, that gets me so excited every morning.
Peter and the Starcatcher, that was a beautiful, really special.
Thanks so much.
Again, like just creating a world. So many of your shows sort of were not adapted from a very famous property, and I really was able to see your vision. Are you excited to sort of create something a little more from scratch, or do you love the challenge of that you're currently, or just sort of whatever comes your way?
I love
come what may.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know, something like working with John Mulaney on his Netflix special.
Yes,
something where he's got this material. He's brilliant. I trust him. He trusts me, and we're building something out that's not adapted from anything, but it's built sort of around his genius, right? And how do you showcase that and elevate it in the best way possible? So stuff like that excites me as much as saying, here's this iconic, beautiful movie, and how do we create a theatrical adaptation of that? And David Byrne, like his catalog is the inspiration for this incredible show that he and Annie B. Parson have made together, and it's a wonderful piece. So to me, I love having these three shows at once right now, and as we said, it's like pure coincidence. But I feel like I see a little bit of the person who was doing these like sort of weird downtown rock concerts in Moulin Rouge, Beetlejuice, and David Byrne show. So they're at least a little. I see a little bit of myself in each of them, and that makes me really, I love that. Yeah.
What about budgets? I mean, when you were doing those downtown shows, you wouldn't have that much money to play with.
Yes.
And sometimes that could almost I've heard people say that makes you almost more creative, right?
Oh, totally.
When you have nothing to spend. And then now when you work on something like Moulin Rouge, which comes in with a budget, and you have money to sort of play with.
Right.
But I guess it's still
always... It's still the same thing, though.
Tricky.
Yeah, with Beetlejuice, we made massive changes from DC, for example, but we had a very small amount of money to make them. And so you make really smart economic choices that are economical for the narrative, character emotion, all that stuff. It just causes you to be wiser. I love the fact that I got to sort of produce my own downtown shows because I do know what like a sheet of Luan costs.
Right.
And, and I know how like crew calls are scheduled. And so I just think it makes me, hopefully to the people around me, a more helpful collaborator, just knowing a little bit about how things actually get made on the micro level. Yeah.
So that would be the wisdom you would give to like some young person who wants to be a director, is sort of just like go make stuff. Right?
That's the number one thing I always say to people is you got to create your own work. Yeah. So the reason I created a theater company not was because I like had this like hot desire to create like Schoolhouse Rock for the theater.
Right.
It was I was at Manhattan Theater Club. I had taken all these classes in college and auditing these grad school classes. And no one ever says you have to have gray hair to direct. But that's basically the truth, right? So I was sort of like 22 and I was looking around and it's like, wow, no one's given like a 35-year-old like a Chekhov play to adapt,
Right.
So I created my own theater company in order to create job opportunities.
Yeah, that's what I love about your success, because you really sort of went out there and showed people what you could do.
Oh, thanks. Well, and there's so many other theater makers that do this. Like Kate Wariski had her own, all these great directors that I admire, all sort of, a lot of them started with that path too. Yeah.
I have to mention Michael Friedman. You're fantastic. I know you've dedicated your work on Moulin Rouge, I believe, to him, to his memory. He was such a brilliant writer. His albums I still listen to. I love all that music. And obviously, you worked on Bloody Bloody, Andrew Jackson, Love's Labour Lost together.
That's right.
I mean, he
and
was
we
sort
were
of
writing another. We were working on another show together when he passed away. Yeah.
And I actually remember, I had Alan Menken here recently, and he was talking about Howard Ashman, and how he sort of spent so much of his life looking for sort of his replacement, because it was almost like when you have a creative collaborator and you suddenly lose them. And the whole community lost Michael so quickly, a couple years ago.
Yeah.
What can you say about him? What do you want people to know about him?
He was the most incredible guy. I for years wanted to work with him. I asked, I sort of begged, and finally we had this coffee, and we were, and Andrew Jackson came like completely whole out of that coffee. Otherwise, I don't think, who knows how long it would have taken. So I remember that coffee shop because I feel very lucky. That was like a really important moment. And he was literally one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. He was able to just take his kind of the cerebral energy that was just vibrating inside his head and create something that would always felt emotional and intimate. I think it's such a huge loss to get to hear more work of his. We were working on a musical together when he passed away, and I'm hoping people will get to hear that music at some point too. It's just he was incredible, and it's just great sadness.
Yeah, I know it was something everybody sort of felt, and it was so sudden, so surprising, and yeah, everyone needs to listen to his music. It was beautiful,
unbelievable.
Yeah, and luckily, like you said, luckily a lot of it was recorded, and he wrote a lot more that we haven't heard. So yeah, I look forward to hearing more.
Me too.
I can't wait to see what's next.
I can't
wait to see Moulin Rouge in every city, forever. I'll go to every opening in every city, every language. It's so incredible, and
thank you.
So congratulations. I love having you here. I love having you on Broadway. I mean, your work has sort of raised the bar of what people are going to expect moving forward from a Broadway musical, and from a popular title that's being taken to the stage, and all of that is just going to make everything better. So keep doing it.
It's very kind of you. Thank you.
Hey everyone, go see Moulin Rouge. I mean, there's so many things to say. It's like you go to the Winter Garden, see Beetlejuice. You could do Moulin Rouge at the Hirschfeld. You can do a double feature.
That's right.
You can have an entire Alex Timber's day on Broadway. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.